Welcome to the Heart's Haven. Let the story begin. Please save my mom. Poor girl, begs the doctor. The millionaire freezes when he sees her face. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above the emergency room, casting a pale glow over polished floors and hurried footsteps. Monitors beeped in distant rhythms. Nurses moved quickly, voices low, controlled. It was just another night at St. Mary's Medical Center. Efficient, routine, detached, until a small voice broke through it all. Please, please save my mom. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it didn't belong in a place that had learned how to ignore pain. A little girl, no older than 7, stood near the intake desk, her fingers clutching the sleeve of a passing doctor. Her coat was too thin for the cold outside, her shoes damp from the late evening rain. Strands of light blonde hair clung to her cheeks, and her wide blue eyes shimmered, not with panic, but with something quieter, something that felt like the last thread of hope. Please, she whispered again, her voice trembling but steady in its purpose. She can't breathe right. I think she's getting worse. The doctor hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough to notice, not enough to stop. Sweetheart, you need to wait your turn, he said gently, already pulling his arm free. We'll get to her as soon as we can. And just like that, he was gone, absorbed back into the rhythm of the hospital. The girl didn't move. She didn't cry. She just stood there, as if the world had paused, but only for her. Around her, everything continued. Phones rang, shoes echoed. A television in the corner played a muted news segment no one was watching. Life went on, as it always did, brushing past the quiet desperation of someone too small to interrupt it. But across the room, someone had stopped. Ethan Carter stood near the far end of the corridor, a dark overcoat draped perfectly over his shoulders, his presence calm, controlled, almost untouchable. To most, he was just another well-dressed man in a private hospital wing. But in truth, he owned half the building. Every machine, every polished surface, every silent hallway, they answered to him. And yet, in that moment, none of it mattered, because he had heard her, not just the words, but the way they broke. His gaze shifted slowly toward the girl, toward the way her small hand tightened into a fist after the doctor walked away, toward the way she swallowed hard, like she was holding something in, something bigger than fear. He took one step forward, then stopped, because she turned. And when Ethan Carter saw her face, the world didn't just pause, it fractured. Something in his chest tightened, sharp, unfamiliar. His breath caught before he understood why. Her eyes, those eyes. He had seen them before, not in a passing moment, not in a stranger, but somewhere deeper, somewhere buried, somewhere he had spent years trying to forget. The noise of the hospital faded into nothing. All that remained was that little girl, and the past, standing right in front of him. Ethan did not realize he was moving until he was already halfway across the room. The distance between them could not have been more than 20 feet. Yet each step felt heavier than the last, as if something unseen was pulling him backward into a past he had carefully locked away. The polished floor reflected his figure in fragments, sharp and distorted beneath the sterile lights. The girl had turned back toward the hallway, standing on the tips of her worn sneakers, trying to see past the swinging doors that had just closed on her mother. She looked so small there, too small to be carrying something this big. Hey, Ethan's voice came out lower than he expected, almost unfamiliar to his own ears. She turned again. Up close, it was undeniable. Those eyes, clear blue, edged with quiet strength, but holding a weight no child should have to carry. For a brief second, Ethan forgot where he was. The hospital, the noise, the movement, all of it blurred into the background. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, studying him the way children do when they are deciding whether the world is safe or not. "Lily," she said finally. "Lily Harper." The name landed softly, but it echoed. Harper. Something shifted behind Ethan's expression, almost imperceptible, like a crack forming beneath glass. "And your mom?" he asked, keeping his tone steady. "She is back there," Lily said, pointing toward the emergency doors. "They said we have to wait, but she is getting worse." Her voice did not break. It held carefully, like she had practiced being strong because there was no other option. Ethan followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "Where is your dad?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "It is just me and my mom." No hesitation, no confusion, just truth. Ethan exhaled slowly, his chest tightening in a way he could not quite control. He had spent years building a life where nothing unexpected could touch him. Every decision calculated, every risk managed, every emotion contained. And yet, standing in front of this child, none of that seemed to matter. "Did anyone check on her yet?" he asked. "A nurse came," Lily said, "but they said we need to wait for a room. We do not have insurance like the other people." The word lingered between them. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He glanced around the room again, this time seeing it differently. Not as an investment, not as a system that functioned smoothly, but as a place where time could mean everything, and not everyone was given the same amount of it. Lily shifted her weight, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. "I tried to wake her up in the car," she added quietly. "She told me not to be scared. She said everything would be okay." Ethan swallowed. There it was again, that feeling. Not pity, not obligation. Something deeper, older. Something he had buried the day he decided that caring too much only led to losing everything. He looked down at Lily. Really looked this time. The damp edges of her coat. The faint smudge of dirt near her wrist. The way she stood so still. Like if she moved too much, something might fall apart. And then, without thinking, he reached out. Not to fix anything yet. Not to promise something he could not control, but simply to place his hand gently over hers. It was cold. "Lily," he said, his voice quieter now, steadier. "I need you to tell me something." She looked up at him again. "When was the last time your mom spoke to you?" Lily's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Then she answered. "In the car," she said. "She told me if anything happened." Her voice paused, not breaking, just holding. Find someone who would listen." The words settled into the space between them, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan Carter realized he had been chosen. The hallway doors had barely finished swinging when Ethan moved. This time, he did not hesitate. "Stay right here," he said softly to Lily, though his voice carried a quiet certainty that felt new even to him. "I am going to take care of this." Her fingers tightened slightly around his hand before letting go, as if she needed that 1 second of reassurance to believe him. Then she nodded. Ethan turned and walked straight toward the nurse's station. The rhythm of the hospital continued around him, but something had shifted in the way he moved through it. People noticed, not because he raised his voice or demanded attention, but because there was a precision in his steps now, a decision already made. A nurse looked up as he approached. "Sir, can I help that patient who just came in?" Ethan said, his tone calm but firm. "Female, mid-30s, brought in by her daughter. She needs immediate evaluation." The nurse hesitated, glancing at the screen. "We are currently at capacity. The doctor has already—" "Call Dr. Reynolds," Ethan interrupted. Not louder, just clearer. "Tell him Ethan Carter is requesting immediate attention." The name landed. A subtle shift, a flicker of recognition. The nurse straightened. "Yes, sir. Right away." Within seconds, the atmosphere changed. Phones were picked up. A second nurse appeared. Someone pushed open the emergency doors again. The system that had moments ago asked a child to wait was now moving. Ethan exhaled slowly, but the tightness in his chest did not ease, because this was not about power. It was about time. And time, he knew too well, did not always wait. He turned back. Lily was still standing exactly where he had left her, her small frame framed by the harsh light of the hallway. She had not sat down. She had not moved. She had simply trusted. When their eyes met, something softened in Ethan's expression. "They are going to see her now," he said. Lily blinked once, as if the words needed a moment to settle. "Really?" "Yes," he said. "Right now." The relief that crossed her face was not loud. It did not burst into tears or laughter. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of relief that came from holding your breath for too long and finally being allowed to let it go. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan nodded, but something in him resisted accepting it. Not yet. The doors opened again, and a nurse gestured for them to come forward. "You can wait just inside," she said gently to Lily. "The doctor will be with your mom shortly." Lily looked up at Ethan, just for a second. He gave a small nod. "I will be right here," he said. She stepped forward, her hand brushing lightly against his coat as she passed, as if anchoring herself to something steady before crossing into the unknown. Ethan remained just outside the doorway, watching as she disappeared into the treatment area. The moment the doors closed, the noise of the hospital rushed back in, but inside him, everything had gone quiet again. He ran a hand slowly over his face, exhaling through a tension he could not name. His mind tried to return to logic, to distance, to the controlled detachment that had defined him for years, but it did not hold, because now there was a name, Lily Harper, and a face. He leaned slightly against the wall, eyes drifting shut for just a second, and then it came. Not as a clear memory, not yet, but as a feeling, a fragment, a woman laughing softly in the glow of late afternoon light. A pair of blue eyes looking at him with warmth he had once believed would never fade. A voice, distant now, but unmistakable. "You always think you can fix everything, Ethan." His eyes opened, sharp, unsteady. And for the first time since he walked into that hospital, he was no longer standing in the present alone. Something from his past had just begun to rise. The waiting area just beyond the emergency doors felt different, quieter, not because the noise had disappeared, but because everything here carried weight. The air held a stillness that made every second feel longer, heavier, more important. Ethan stepped inside slowly, the automatic doors sealing shut behind him with a soft click. Lily sat in a chair near the wall, her feet not quite touching the floor. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers tightly interlocked as if holding on to something invisible. She stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the closed door where Mother had been taken. She did not look like a child waiting. She looked like someone bracing. Ethan moved closer but did not sit immediately. For a moment, he simply watched her. The way her shoulders stayed perfectly still. The way her breathing came slow and controlled, like she had taught herself not to panic. It unsettled him. Children were not supposed to be this composed. "Hey," he said gently. Lily looked up. "Did they say anything?" he asked. She shook her head. "They said the doctor's checking her now." Ethan nodded and finally took the seat beside her. The chair creaked softly under his weight, a small, ordinary sound in a place filled with uncertainty. For a while, neither of them spoke. Time stretched. A wall clock ticked steadily somewhere above them, each second landing louder than it should have. Lily shifted slightly, pulling something from the pocket of her coat. It was small, worn, a thin silver chain with a tiny pendant attached. She held it carefully, almost instinctively. Ethan's eyes fell to it, and everything inside him stilled. "Is that yours?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Lily glanced down, then nodded. "My mom gave it to me." She turned the pendant slightly between her fingers. It caught the light for just a second, enough for Ethan to see the shape clearly. A small oval, faded but unmistakable. His breath caught. "Can I see it?" he asked. Lily hesitated, just for a moment, then placed it gently in his hand. It felt lighter than he expected, cool, familiar. Ethan turned it over. On the back, barely visible beneath years of wear, were two engraved initials, E.C. The world tilted, not violently, not suddenly, but enough to make everything else fall away. His fingers tightened slightly around the pendant as a memory surfaced, clearer now. A late afternoon, warm light spilling through an open window. A woman standing across from him, smiling softly as she fastened that very chain around her neck. "You are going to forget me," she had said, half teasing, half afraid. "I could not even if I tried," he had replied. But he had, or at least he had tried to. Ethan closed his hand slowly, grounding himself in the present again. "Where did your mom get this?" he asked carefully. Lily shrugged. She said it was from someone important, a long time ago. Important, the word echoed. Ethan swallowed, the weight in his chest growing heavier with every passing second. "And your mom's name?" he asked. Lily looked at him, a small crease forming between her brows, as if she was trying to understand why it mattered. "Her name is Claire," she said. "Claire Harper." The name hit him like a quiet shock, not loud, not explosive, but deep, final. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze drifting toward the closed doors again. The steady rhythm of the hospital returned, but it no longer felt distant. It felt personal. Claire, after all these years, after everything he had buried, everything he had walked away from, everything he had convinced himself no longer mattered. She was here, on the other side of that door, and the little girl sitting beside him. He looked at Lily again, really looked this time. The eyes, the strength, the quiet way she held herself together. His chest tightened, because suddenly, this was no longer just a moment of kindness. This was something else, something he could not walk away from, something he had never truly escaped. And as the seconds ticked by, One thought began to rise above all the rest. This was not a coincidence. This was a return. Ethan did not speak right away. Claire. The name lingered in the air like something fragile, something that could disappear if he moved too quickly or said the wrong thing. His hand slowly opened, and the small pendant rested in his palm again, catching the sterile light above. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. "Your mom, Claire Harper," he repeated quietly, as if saying it out loud would confirm what his mind was still trying to process. Lily nodded. "Yeah. Do you know her?" The question was simple, but it landed heavier than anything else that night. Ethan's eyes stayed on the necklace, his thumb brushing gently over the faded initials. Memories were no longer fragments now. They were returning in full, clear, undeniable. A park bench on a warm spring afternoon, 2 coffees sitting untouched as conversation stretched longer than time allowed. Claire laughing, her head tilted slightly, sunlight catching in her hair. "You do not have to be strong all the time, Ethan," she had said once, her voice soft but certain. "You just choose to be." He had smiled then, dismissed it, moved on. That had been years ago. Another life. Before ambition had taken priority over everything else. Before silence had become easier than connection. "I knew her," he said finally. It was not a lie. But it was not the whole truth either. Lily studied him for a second, as if trying to read something beneath his words. Children had a way of doing that, seeing past what was said and into what was felt. "She talks about someone sometimes," Lily added quietly. "Not a lot, just when she thinks I am not listening." Ethan's chest tightened. "What does she say?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked down at her hands, thinking. "She says he was kind," she said, "but he left." The words were gentle. There was no accusation in them, but somehow that made them harder to hear. Ethan leaned back slightly, exhaling through something that felt heavier than regret. He had built an empire on decisions, clean, calculated, forward-moving decisions. He had never looked back, until now. The steady hum of the hospital seemed louder again. A cart rolled past, somewhere down the hall. A voice called out softly behind a curtain. Life continued, indifferent to the quiet shift happening in a single chair. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again, grounding himself. "Lily," he said, turning toward her, "how long has your mom been sick?" "A while," she answered. "She said it would get better. It always does." She paused, then added more softly, "But this time feels different." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew that feeling. The difference between hope and knowing, between waiting and running out of time. He glanced once more at the closed doors, then back at Lily, her small shoulders, her steady eyes, the quiet strength she carried without complaint. And something inside him shifted again. Not just recognition, not just memory, responsibility, not the kind that came from obligation or money or power, the kind that came from being part of a story, whether you chose it or not. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice steady now. "You are not going through this alone anymore," he said. Lily looked at him, searching, and for the first time since they met, she did not look like she was holding everything by herself. The waiting room had grown quieter, but not calmer. Time had a way of stretching in places like this, turning minutes into something heavier, something that pressed against your chest if you sat still long enough. The clock on the wall read just past 9:30, but it felt much later. Lily had not moved. She still sat with her hands folded in her lap, her shoulders slightly tense, her eyes drifting every few seconds back to the closed doors. But something had changed, not on the outside, not in a way anyone passing by would notice. Inside, the tightness she had been holding alone had eased just a little. Ethan sat beside her, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees, his hands loosely clasped together. He was not checking his phone. He was not taking calls. The world that usually demanded his attention had fallen completely silent. For the first time in years, he had nowhere else to be. "Does she like stories?" he asked after a while, his voice soft enough not to disturb the fragile quiet. Lily looked at him, a little surprised by the question. "My mom?" He nodded. "She used to read to me," Lily said, "before she got too tired." Her lips pressed together slightly. "She always changed the endings." Ethan glanced at her. "Change them?" Lily nodded. "If it was a sad story, she would make it better. She said, 'Endings are not always what people expect.'" Ethan let that sit for a moment. Endings are not always what people expect. Claire used to say things like that, not to sound wise, but because she believed them. "What kind of stories did you like?" he asked. Lily thought for a second. "The ones where someone comes back," she said, "when everyone thinks they are gone, but they are not." Ethan looked down at his hands. There it was again, that quiet, steady pull, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just undeniable. "I think those are my favorite too," he said. Lily studied him for a moment, her head tilting slightly. "You do?" He nodded. "Yeah." Another silence followed, but this one felt different. It was not filled with fear. It was filled with something softer, something almost unfamiliar. Connection. Lily shifted in her seat, her small fingers brushing against the edge of his coat again. Not by accident this time, but not fully on purpose either. Just enough to feel that he was still there. Ethan did not pull away. Instead, he let his hand rest gently beside hers, not holding, not forcing, just present. A nurse walked past, offering a brief, reassuring glance. The world moved, but slower now, as if it respected the quiet space forming between them. "Are you really going to stay?" Lily asked suddenly. The question was careful, not demanding, just honest. Ethan turned toward her fully. "Yes," he said. "No hesitation, no calculation, just truth." Lily's shoulders lowered slightly, as if something she had been bracing against finally gave way. "Okay," she whispered. And for the first time that night, she leaned back in her chair. Not because everything was fine, but because she did not have to stand alone anymore. Ethan looked toward the doors again, then back at her. And in that moment, something settled deep inside him. Not a decision, not a plan. Something stronger than both. A promise. Silent, unspoken, but real. Whatever came next, he was not leaving this time. The doors had been closed for what felt like forever. Lily had stopped asking how long it would take, not because she did not care anymore, but because she had learned that some questions did not have answers right away. So instead, she watched. She listened. She waited. Ethan did the same. But waiting had never been his strength. He had built his life on action, decisions, control. If something needed to be fixed, he fixed it. If something stood in the way, he moved it. That was how the world worked. Except here, none of that applied. Here, Everything depended on someone else, and that unsettled him more than he expected. The doors finally opened. Both of them stood at the same time. A doctor stepped out, removing his gloves as he walked toward them. His expression was not cold, not distant, but it was careful, measured. "Family?" the doctor asked. Lily stepped forward immediately. "I am her daughter." The doctor gave a small nod, then glanced at Ethan, as if trying to place him. Ethan did not explain, not yet. "How is she?" Lily asked, her voice steady but quiet. The doctor exhaled slightly before answering. "She is stable right now, but she came in very weak. Her lungs are under a lot of stress, and her body has been fighting this for a while." Lily's fingers tightened together. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked. The question hung in the air. The doctor did not answer right away. "We're doing everything we can," he said finally. "But she needs immediate treatment, and she needs to stay here. There are complications we need to monitor closely over the next 24 to 48 hours. Ethan stepped forward slightly. "What kind of treatment?" he asked. The doctor turned to him. "She will need a full course of care, including respiratory support and observation. It is not something that can be delayed." Ethan nodded once. "That will not be a problem," he said. The doctor hesitated. "I also need to be transparent. Without proper coverage, the cost." "It is handled," Ethan said calmly. No hesitation, no negotiation. The doctor studied him for a second, then gave a small nod. "All right, we will proceed immediately." Relief did not rush in all at once. It came slowly, like a door opening just enough to let light through. Lily looked up at Ethan, her eyes searching his face. "You mean she can stay?" "Yes," he said. "For as long as she needs?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze. "For as long as she needs." Lily's breath caught just slightly. Not a sob, not a breakdown, just a quiet release of something she had been holding in for too long. "Thank you," she whispered. But Ethan shook his head gently. "Do not thank me yet," he said. "We are not finished." Because they were not even close. The doctor turned back toward the doors. "You can see her for a moment, but only briefly. She is still very weak." Lily nodded quickly. Ethan stepped back as she moved forward, her small figure disappearing once again through the doorway. He remained where he was, watching, waiting. But now the tension inside him had changed. It was no longer uncertainty. It was resolve, because this was no longer just about helping a stranger. This was about something unfinished, something that had found its way back, whether he was ready or not. And as the doors closed again, one thought settled clearly in his mind. This time, he was not going to stand on the outside of the story. The room was dimmer than the hallway. Soft light settled over the hospital bed, quiet and careful, as if even the brightness had been lowered out of respect. Machines hummed gently, steady and controlled, their rhythms filling the silence in a way that felt reassuring. Lily stepped inside slowly. Her movements were cautious, almost reverent, like she was afraid that if she moved too quickly, something fragile might break. "Mom?" she whispered. Claire lay against the pillows, her face pale but peaceful, her breathing shallow yet steady. There was no panic in the room, no urgency, just a quiet fight happening beneath the surface. Her eyes fluttered slightly at the sound of Lily's voice. Then, slowly, they opened. "Hey, sweetheart." Claire's voice was soft, worn but unmistakably warm. Lily's composure finally cracked, not in fear, in relief. "You scared me," she said, her voice trembling as she moved closer to the bed, her small hand finding her mother's. "I am sorry," Claire murmured, her fingers weakly curling around Lily's. "I told you everything would be okay." Lily nodded quickly, as if she needed to believe it again. "It is going to be," she said. "They're helping you now." Claire's gaze shifted slightly, unfocused at first, then steadying, toward the doorway, toward the figure standing just outside, Ethan. For a moment neither of them moved. Time seemed to fold in on itself, pulling past and present into the same quiet space. Claire blinked once as if she was not sure what she was seeing. Then her breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered. His name sounded different coming from her, familiar, unfinished. Ethan stepped into the room slowly, each movement deliberate, as if crossing an invisible line he had avoided for years. "It is me," he said quietly. No explanations, no defenses, just truth. Claire studied him, her eyes searching his face the way someone does when they are trying to understand something impossible. "You are really here," she said. "I am," Ethan replied. A silence followed, but it was not empty. It was full of everything they had not said, and everything they never had the chance to. Claire glanced down at Lily, then back at Ethan. "You helped her," she said softly. Ethan nodded once. "I should have done it a long time ago." Claire's expression softened, not with judgment, but with something gentler, understanding. "You always did come back," she whispered faintly. Ethan did not answer right away, because this time it was not just about coming back, it was about staying. Lily looked between them, confusion flickering across her face. "You know each other?" Claire's hand tightened slightly around hers. "Yes," she said quietly. Then she looked at Ethan again, and in that look, everything was there. The past, the distance, the truth waiting just beneath the surface. Ethan met her gaze, steady now, and without needing to say it out loud, they both understood. This was not the end of the story. This was where it finally began again. The room grew still again, but this time it was different. Not heavy, not uncertain, just quiet, in a way that allowed something new to exist. Lily remained by her mother's side, her small hand wrapped around Claire's, holding on with a kind of gentle determination that no one had taught her, but life had somehow given her anyway. Ethan stood a few steps away, not distant, but careful. For years, he had lived in spaces where everything was clear, controlled, predictable. But this was not something he could manage with decisions or numbers. This was something he had to feel. Claire's breathing steadied, her eyes drifting between the two of them. There was fatigue there, yes, but also something softer now, something that had not been there before. Relief. "You stayed," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. "I am not leaving," he replied. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything he had said in years. Claire studied him for a moment, as if measuring the truth in that promise. Then, slowly, she gave the smallest nod, not because she needed convincing, but because she understood what it had taken for him to say it. Lily looked up at Ethan again, her eyes searching, still piecing together something she could feel but did not fully understand. "Are you going to come back tomorrow?" she asked. Ethan stepped closer this time, no hesitation now. "I am going to be here," he said. "Tomorrow and the day after that." Lily held his gaze for a second longer. Then she nodded. That was enough. No questions about why. No need for explanations. Just trust. Outside the room, the hospital continued its quiet rhythm. Nurses passed by. Monitors beeped steadily. Life moved forward one moment at a time. But inside that room, something had shifted. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but in the kind of way that changes everything slowly, from the inside out. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and gently placed the small pendant back into Lily's hand. "It belongs with you," he said. Lily closed her fingers around it, holding it a little tighter this time. "Mom says it means you're never alone," she said softly. Ethan looked at her, then at Claire, and for the first time in a long time, he believed that might be true. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, not as a visitor, not as someone passing through, but as someone who had finally decided to stay in the story. No more distance, no more waiting, just presence. And as the soft light settled over the room, wrapping around 3 lives that had once been separate, a quiet truth remained. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that brings everything back to life.